Hi Guy, tonight we venture into a Joseon winter, where the wind whispers secrets down from Bukhansan mountain. You probably won't survive the bone-chilling cold. Just kidding, it's a story. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound of your footsteps on the frozen stream echoes in the stillness beneath the imposing shadow of Bukhansan mountain. Each icy gust of wind feels like 1,000 tiny needles pricking at your exposed skin. It's colder than a royal's welcome after you accidentally sat on their dog. You pull your thin cloak tighter, a futile attempt to ward off the biting chill that seeps deep into your bones. You are Joseon, a clay doll maker. Your fingers, usually nimble and adept at shaping delicate figures from earth and water, are now numb and clumsy. They ache with a deep, persistent throb that makes even the simplest movements a struggle. Joseon winters were notoriously harsh, winters that could freeze the tears on your face before they even had a chance to fall. Winters that tested the resilience of even the hardiest souls. And tonight, the winter is testing you. You're searching for someone whose words are a balm against the biting wind, someone whose stories offer a refuge from the relentless cold. You're searching for Chobi, the palace storyteller, a woman whose tales are warmer than a king's ondol floor, more captivating than a shadow puppet show, more vibrant than the silk robes of the Yangban. In the Joseon court, storytellers weren't just entertainers. They were keepers of history, weavers of dreams, and trusted confidants. Their words held power, shaping opinions and influencing even the most powerful figures in the land. You trudge onwards, the frozen stream a treacherous path beneath your worn leather boots. The wind howls through the barren branches of the trees, a mournful song that accompanies your lonely journey. Finally, in the distance, a flicker of orange catches your eye. A small fire, no bigger than a goblin's toenail, yet burning with a fierce intensity, brighter than a general's ambition. Beside it, wrapped in layers of furs and blankets, sits Chobi. Relief washes over you, a wave of warmth that momentarily eclipses the biting cold. You approach her cautiously, your breath clouding the air in front of you. She looks up, her eyes, wise and ancient, reflecting the flickering flames. A small smile graces her lips as she gestures for you to join her. You settle down beside her, the heat from the fire a welcome embrace. You watch as she feeds a few more twigs into the flames, the crackling sounds a comforting counterpoint to the howling wind. Finally, you ask, "Chobi, have you heard any new tales lately?" She smiles, a knowing glint in her eyes. "Indeed, Seojang. I have heard whispers of a secret passage discovered beneath the palace, hidden beneath the very ondol where our king sleeps." Your breath catches in your throat. A secret passage? Beneath the king's chambers? The implications ripple through you, a cold dread replacing the warmth of the fire. Historians have long debated the existence of such passages, speculating on their purpose, from escape routes to hidden rendezvous points. Their very existence shrouded in mystery, fueling rumors and legends. Chobi continues, her voice low and conspiratorial. They say it leads to, well, no one knows for sure. Some say it leads to a hidden chamber filled with ancient treasures. Others say it's an escape route, built for times of war. And still others whisper of secret meetings, clandestine gatherings under the very nose of the king. You shiver, but this time it's not entirely from the cold. The open secret of the passage, its unknown purpose, fills you with a sense of unease. The frozen stream, a dark ribbon winding through the snowy landscape, seems to mirror your own turbulent thoughts. The wind whispers through the trees, carrying the weight of untold stories, of secrets buried deep beneath the frozen earth. You glance at the distant palace, its silhouette stark against the twilight sky. The thought of the passage, hidden beneath the king's ondol, sends a chill down your spine. You probably won't survive a nighttime patrol if you catch cold. Just saying. The dangers of a Joseon winter pale in comparison to the dangers of court intrigue. And in a world of whispers and shadows, Who knows what secrets might be lurking just beneath the surface? The workshop, smaller than a gisang slipper, was thick, with the earthy aroma of wet clay, the scent clinging to my clothes like a second skin. Sunlight, filtered through the paper windows, cast long shadows across the shelves crammed with my creations. Dancing girls, plump merchants, fierce tigers, and serene Buddhas, all frozen in perpetual smiles or scowls. I'd been staring at them for what felt like hours, a knot tightening in my gut. The doll, the one from the nobleman's order, a simple court lady figure, its glazed smile mocking me. It held a secret, a dangerous one, and it was burning a hole in my workbench. The memory of that frozen stream, its surface mirroring the sky like a polished obsidian blade, flashed in my mind. The nobleman's whispered words, the furtive glance over his shoulder, the weight of the coin purse in my hand. It all pointed to something far more sinister than a simple commission. He'd specifically requested the doll be hollow, an odd request, but I hadn't questioned it then. Foolish. Now back in the quiet solitude of my workshop, I understood. Carefully, I picked up the doll. Its smooth, cool surface felt unsettling against my fingertips. I ran a fingernail along a barely perceptible seam at the back, prying it open gently. Inside, nestled amongst the dried clay dust, was a tightly rolled slip of parchment. My heart pounded against my ribs as I unfurled it. The spidery script, penned in hurried strokes, revealed a plot, a conspiracy against the king himself, orchestrated by none other than An Zhong, the royal advisor, a man who smiled as easily as he breathed poison. The words swam before my eyes, a planned ambush during the upcoming royal hunt, a carefully orchestrated accident, assassination. The parchment trembled in my hand. My breath caught in my throat. What had I stumbled into? I felt a chill run down my spine despite the warmth of the kiln nearby. Options swirled in my mind, each more dangerous than trying to steal a butcher's cleaver. Could I ignore it? Pretend I hadn't seen it? The image of the king's kind face, the benevolent ruler who had always treated his people with fairness, flashed before my eyes. No, I couldn't. But speaking out against a man as powerful as An Zhong was akin to signing my own death warrant. He had eyes and ears everywhere. I was a simple craftsman, a nobody. My word against his, it was a pebble against a mountain. I paced the confines of my workshop, the clay dust rising around my sandals like a miniature dust storm. Could I go to the magistrates? They were more likely to be in An Zhong's pocket than not. The thought left a bitter taste in my mouth. There was one man, however. One man I might be able to trust. Choi Sang, the captain of the royal guard. A man known for his unwavering loyalty to the king, his fierce integrity, a man who looked fiercer than a hungry tiger, and possessed a sense of justice as sharp as a honed blade. I'd met him briefly once, during the king's birthday celebrations when he'd complimented a miniature warrior doll I'd crafted. It was a slim thread of hope, but it was all I had. The decision made, a sliver of calm settled within the storm raging inside me. I carefully replaced the message in the doll, sealing it shut. I needed to get to Choi Sang, but how? Going directly to the palace was out of the question. An Zhong's spies were everywhere. I needed a plan, a way to contact him discreetly. The image of the Joseon house, the Flower Moon Pavilion, flickered in my mind. It was a known haunt of the royal guards, a place where they could unwind after their duties, a place where whispers traveled like smoke. Choi Sang was known to frequent the establishment. It was a risk, but a calculated one. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I prepared myself. I donned my plainest clothes, a simple tunic and trousers, hoping to blend into the bustling streets. Tucking the doll safely inside my satchel, I stepped out of my workshop, the cool evening air a welcome contrast to the stuffy confines of my workspace. The streets of Hanyang were alive with activity. Merchants hawked their wares, children chased stray dogs, and the aroma of street food filled the air. Yet, beneath the veneer of normalcy, I felt a sense of unease, a prickling awareness of unseen eyes watching my every move. I quickened my pace, weaving through the crowds, my hand protectively clutching the satchel containing the clay doll and its dangerous secret. My heart pounded a steady rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat accompanying me on my journey, a journey that could very well decide the fate of the king and perhaps my own. The Flower Moon Pavilion beckoned, a beacon of hope in the gathering darkness, a stage where the next act of this dangerous play was about to begin. I just prayed I wouldn't be playing the role of the tragic hero. This wasn't a play, after all. This was real, and the stakes were higher than I could have ever imagined. I found him by the stream, a ribbon of water slicing through the emerald green of the royal gardens. Choisung moved with a fluid grace that belied the deadly intent of his practice. Each stroke of his sword was more precise than a calligrapher's brush, a whisper of steel cutting the air. He looked fiercer than that tiger we talked about, remember? And he looked like he'd sooner eat my hat than offer a friendly nod. The sunlight glinted off his brow, highlighting the tight set of his jaw. This wasn't the Choisung I knew, the one who'd share rice wine and jokes under the cherry blossoms. This was a warrior, honed and ready. I cleared my throat, the sound seeming to echo unnaturally loud in the sudden stillness. He stopped mid-swing, the tip of his sword hovering inches from the ground, and turned to face me. His eyes, usually warm and welcoming, were now sharp and assessing, like a hawk sizing up its prey. "You found me," he stated, his voice flat and devoid of its usual playful lilt. "I did," I replied, shifting nervously from foot to foot. The clay doll, tucked safely within my robes, felt heavier than the king's winter robes. Each breath seemed to amplify the weight of the secret it held. "I have a message for you, from Anjong." His expression didn't change, but the air around him seemed to crackle with tension. "Speak." I relayed the message, each word carefully chosen, each syllable laced with the gravity of the situation. Anjong's plea for the king's safety, the veiled warning of a plot brewing in the shadows of the court, the desperate request for Choisung's aid. The mainstream fact, the one everyone knew, hammered in our heads from childhood, was that the royal guard was responsible for the king's safety. It was their duty, their sacred oath, to protect him with their lives. This message, this whispered warning, placed Choisung directly in the crosshairs of that duty. As I spoke, Choisung remained motionless, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the trees. The only indication of his inner turmoil was the slight twitch of his hand gripping the sword hilt. When I finished, the silence stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the gentle murmur of the stream. Finally, he sheathed his sword with a soft click. The sound, in the quiet of the gardens, seemed to reverberate with the weight of his unspoken thoughts. He turned to face the flowing water, his back to me. Some Joseon swordsmen believed that practicing near water enhanced their focus. Something about the constant flow, the mirroring surface, helped them to clear their minds and hone their intent. I wondered if that was why he chose this spot, this secluded haven by the stream, or perhaps it was simply the need to be alone, to grapple with the storm raging within him. "Anjong asks much of me," he finally said, his voice low and strained. I didn't reply. What could I say? I knew the depth of the dilemma he faced. His loyalty to the king, ingrained in him from birth, pitted against his friendship with Anjong, a bond forged in years of shared hardship and camaraderie. Historians still argue about the extent of Anjong's influence in the court, some painting him as a manipulative power broker, others as a loyal friend and advisor to the king. But I knew Choisung. I knew the respect he held for Anjong, the trust that existed between them. This message, this plea for help, wasn't just a request. It was a test, a crucible in which his loyalties would be forged anew. He turned back to me, his face etched with the weariness of a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "The king trusts me. He relies on me to protect him. And yet," he trailed off, his gaze dropping to the ground. "And yet you trust Anjong," I finished for him, the words hanging heavy in the air. He nodded slowly. "Anjong has never steered me wrong. He has always looked out for me, just as I have always looked out for him." "And what if," I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, "what if they are both right? What if there is a genuine threat to the king, but Anjong's methods are unorthodox?" Choisung closed his eyes, his face a mask of pain. This was the heart of his dilemma. How could he reconcile his conflicting loyalties? How could he choose between the king he was sworn to protect and the friend he trusted with his life? He paced by the stream, the rhythmic swish of his robes the only sound for a long moment. The water flowed on, oblivious to the turmoil unfolding on its banks. Finally, he stopped. His shoulders slumped with the weight of his decision. "I need time," he said, his voice hoarse. "Time to think. Time to assess the situation." I nodded. I understood. This wasn't a decision to be made lightly. The fate of the king, the stability of the court, perhaps even the future of Joseon, rested on Choi Song's choice. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a plea I couldn't ignore. "Tell Anjong, tell him I need time, but tell him I will do what I believe is right." And with that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the royal gardens, leaving me alone by the whispering stream, the clay doll still heavy in my robes, its silent message echoing the weight of the dilemma Choi Sang now carried. Choi Sang's hand tightened on the loose stone. "Are you sure about this?" I whispered, my voice barely audible above the rustle of the wind in the courtyard's lone pine tree. He didn't answer, just pulled the stone free. A grinding sound echoed in the sudden silence, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a yawning blackness. Chobi's fantastical tales of secret passages, dismissed as drunken ramblings just hours before, were suddenly terrifyingly real. "After you," Choi Sang gestured, a flicker of a smile playing on his lips. I took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of dust and something else, something acrid and unpleasant, darker than a magistrate's heart, and it smells like a mix of bat droppings and old secrets. I stepped into the passage, Choi Sang close behind. The heavy stone door swung shut with a resounding thud, plunging us into absolute darkness. Thankfully, Choi Sang had brought a lantern, its small flame casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. The passage was narrow, the air stagnant and heavy. The floor sloped gently downwards, and with every step the smell intensified. We walked in silence, the only sounds the scrape of our shoes on the uneven stone and the occasional drip of water. Mainstream fact. Many Joseon palaces had secret passages, I thought, but I have the misfortune to stumble into one involving this particular conspiracy. It made the historical tidbit somehow less interesting. My fingers brushed against the cold, damp wall, and I suppressed a shudder. After what felt like an eternity, the passage opened into a larger chamber. Choi Sung raised the lantern, and I gasped. The chamber was circular, the walls lined with shelves stacked with scrolls and documents. A low table sat in the center, surrounded by several figures. The flickering lantern light revealed the face of An Jong, his expression grim, and beside him, several other men I recognized as members of the court. They were talking in hushed tones, their words a mix of whispers and urgent murmurs. We crept closer, pressing ourselves against the walls, straining to hear. "The king must be persuaded," Anjong was saying, his voice low and intense. "The queen's influence is too strong. This is the only way to restore balance to the court." Another man spoke, his face shadowed by the hood of his cloak. "But what if he refuses? He trusts the queen implicitly." "He will have no choice," Anjong replied, a hard glint in his eyes. "We will present him with a fait accompli." He paused, then added, "And we have ensured certain contingencies are in place." Quirky tidbit. Hidden chambers and palaces sometimes had secret escape routes. I hoped we could find one of those contingencies ourselves shortly. My mind raced, piecing together their words. They were planning something drastic, something that would force the king's hand. And whatever it was, it involved removing the queen from power. Suddenly, a bat swooped down from the ceiling, its leathery wings brushing against my face. I flinched, stifling a cry. "You probably won't survive long if you trip on a bat," came the absurd thought, flashing through my mind. The men at the table looked up, startled. For a heart-stopping moment, their eyes met ours. Choi-san grabbed my hand and pulled me back into the passage. We didn't speak. Didn't need to. We both understood the danger we were in. We ran, stumbling through the darkness, the echoes of our footsteps chasing us. The image of Anjong's face, twisted in anger, burned in my mind. We finally emerged back into the courtyard, the fresh night air a welcome relief from the oppressive atmosphere of the hidden chamber. The stone slid back into place, leaving no trace of the passage behind. We stood there for a moment, catching our breath, the silence broken only by the chirping of crickets. We exchanged a look, two pebbles tossed in the stream of events, the ripples of our discovery spreading outwards, destined to disrupt the placid surface of courtly life. We were caught in something far larger than ourselves, and we were about to be swept away by the current. The weight of what we had overheard settled heavily upon me. Anjong's plot was far more advanced and dangerous than we had imagined, and the king was in grave danger. But how could we warn him without revealing our own involvement, without exposing ourselves to the wrath of Anjong and his conspirators? As we made our way back through the darkened palace grounds, I couldn't shake the image of Anjong's face, his words echoing in my ears. And another, more ludicrous thought flitted through my mind. Historians still debate whether Anjong's plan was to make the favorite ondol of the king into the entrance of the secret passage. It seemed outlandish, absurd, even for a conspiracy of this magnitude. But then again, so did everything else that had happened tonight. In the shadowy world of palace intrigue, it seemed, nothing was beyond the realm of possibility. The air in the hidden chamber hung thick and still, the only sound the erratic thump of Choi Sang's heart. His numb fingers, the ones that had fumbled with the puzzle box just moments ago, now curled tightly around the hilt of a small, exquisitely crafted dagger he'd found concealed within. Across the chamber, Anjong stood bathed in the flickering lamplight, his face a mask of carefully constructed nonchalance. But Choi Sang saw the twitch in his jaw, the flicker of unease in his eyes. He'd seen it before, on the faces of men with secrets. Anjong, Choi Sang's voice was low, each syllable weighted with the gravity of the moment. You have much to answer for. Anjong's carefully crafted facade crumbled. A sneer twisted his lips. And you, Sang, have much to learn. The sneer was the final spark. The accusation of betrayal, of treachery, echoing in the confined space, was more than Choi Sang could bear. Loyalty, a value woven into the very fabric of his being, had been torn asunder. He lunged. Anjong, though surprised by the sudden attack, reacted quickly. The chamber, once a place of hushed secrets, erupted into chaos. Furniture overturned with crashes that echoed the turmoil in Choi Sang's heart. Insults, sharp and venomous as viper strikes, flew between them. The fight was messy, more chaotic than a market day, a whirlwind of flailing limbs and desperate grapples. Mainstream fact, factional struggles within the court were common. This one, however, was taking place behind a tapestry depicting a particularly serene landscape, adding a touch of irony to the proceedings. Choi Sang, fueled by righteous fury, managed to disarm Anjong, sending his sword clattering across the stone floor. He pressed the dagger against Anjong's throat, the cold steel a stark contrast to the burning rage within him. Why? Choi Sang demanded, his voice hoarse. Why betray the king? Why betray us all? Anjong, trapped and defeated, finally cracked. The carefully constructed mask of indifference shattered, revealing the festering resentment beneath. Slight, he spat, the word laced with bitterness. He humiliated me. Passed me over for a promotion, lauded a lesser man for work. He mocked my ondol design, said it was too extravagant. The confession hung in the air, a strange mix of pettiness and profound hurt. Choi Sang stared at him, a wave of disbelief washing over him. This was the reason for the betrayal? This petty grievance, this bruised ego, had led to this chaos, this near destruction. Quirky tidbit. Some historians believe Anjong was also the maker of the king's ondol, a fact that adds a layer of complexity to his perceived slight. Anjong, seeing the disbelief in Choi Sang's eyes, let out a harsh laugh. You think it's small? You think it's nothing? He took my pride, my honor? I built that ondol with my own 2 hands, poured my heart and soul into it, and he mocked it. Before Choi Sang could respond, a screech echoed through the chamber. From the shadows, a dark, leathery form swooped down, then another, and another. The secret passage bats, disturbed by the commotion, were emerging from their roost. Oh, this is not good, Choi Sang muttered, his eyes darting between the increasingly agitated bats and the still seething Anjong. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that being chased through a narrow, twisting passage by a swarm of angry bats was unlikely to end well. Joke 2, you probably won't survive being chased by the secret passage bats if they gang up. They're surprisingly coordinated for creatures that navigate by echolocation. He released Anjong, more out of necessity than forgiveness, and backed away slowly, his eyes fixed on the swirling cloud of bats. "We'll settle this later," he hissed, already planning his escape route. Anjong, momentarily forgotten in the face of the more immediate threat, scrambled to his feet, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and... was that a flicker of gratitude? The bats descended, and the chamber became a maelstrom of flapping wings and panicked shouts. Later, much later, when the dust had settled and the bats had retreated back into the darkness, Choi Sang would reflect on the events of the night. He would wonder about Anjong, about the strange mixture of resentment and talent that had driven him to such extremes. He would ponder the fragility of loyalty, the ease with which it could be shattered by perceived slights. And he would wonder, as historians still do to this day, whether it was truly Anjong who had left the message inside the clay doll in the first place, setting this whole chain of events in motion. The truth, like the bats in the secret passage, remained elusive, hidden in the shadows. The heavy oak doors of the banquet hall burst open, revealing a wave of royal guards clad in gleaming armor. At their head stood King Sejong himself, his face a mask of controlled fury. In his hand he clutched the very message meant to warn him, its edges crumpled from his iron grip. The room, moments before a chaotic free-for-all, froze. Anjong, still clutching his bloodied sword, stared at the king, his face draining of all color. The fight seemed to drain out of him along with the blood. "Anjong," the king's voice boomed, echoing through the suddenly silent hall. "You stand accused of treason against the crown. Your plot, vile and ill-conceived, has been exposed." He gestured towards us, towards the overturned tables and scattered food, the silent testament to the struggle that had just transpired. "These loyal subjects have bravely defended the throne against your treachery." The guards moved swiftly, surrounding Anjong. He offered no resistance, the defeat in his eyes mirroring the despair that now clung to him like a shroud. His sword clattered to the floor, the sound sharp and final in the stunned silence. The guards bound his hands, the ropes biting into his wrists, a stark symbol of his fallen ambitions. He was dragged away, his head hanging low, his gaze fixed on the floor, a man stripped bare of his power and his pride. Treason, everyone knew, meant death. A quick death, perhaps, but death nonetheless. King Sejong's gaze swept across the room, taking in the overturned furniture, the spilled wine, the remnants of the feast turned battlefield. His expression softened slightly as he turned to us, a glimmer of gratitude in his eyes. "Choi Sang," he said, his voice regaining some of its usual warmth. "And you," he paused, looking at me with a hint of amusement, clearly still struggling to remember my name. "You have both proven your unwavering loyalty to the crown. For your bravery and quick thinking, you will be richly rewarded." A ripple of murmurs went through the remaining guests. Rewards for loyalty were legendary. Some whispered about grants of land, others about special titles bestowed upon those who found favor with the king. My mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps a small plot of land to call my own? Enough to finally afford a decent pair of shoes? Or maybe, just maybe, a title that would finally allow me to eat something other than rice and kimchi? The rumbling in my stomach, a constant companion, grew louder at the thought. Choi Sang bowed deeply, his expression a mixture of humility and pride. I followed suit, trying to imitate his graceful posture, but probably resembling more a wilting flower than a dignified courtier. The celebrations, delayed but not deterred, began anew. The servants, remarkably efficient, quickly cleared the debris and brought out fresh platters of food and pitchers of wine. Music filled the air, drowning out the lingering tension of the previous moments. King Sejong raised his cup in a toast, his voice ringing out, "To loyalty, and to a kingdom secure." The room erupted in cheers, the guests eager to put the unsettling events behind them and embrace the festive atmosphere. Toast after toast was made, each more extravagant than the last. The wine flowed freely, blurring the lines between celebration and excess. I found myself swept up in the revelry, laughing and talking with newfound companions, my head spinning pleasantly from the potent rice wine. "This," I thought hazily, "is the life. Fine food, flowing wine, the favor of the king. What more could a person want? I vaguely remembered someone telling me Joseon-era parties were intense. They hadn't been kidding. My vision began to blur, the room tilting precariously. I stumbled, catching myself on a nearby table laden with food. Dimly, I registered the concerned look on Choi Sang-'s face as he tried to steer me away from the overflowing wine bowl. Maybe just one more. I slurred, reaching for the cup with a trembling hand. The last thing I remember is a wave of dizziness and the unsettling feeling that I might not survive the night. Joseon parties were indeed intense. Later, much later, historians would debate the finer points of the failed coup, the motivations of An Zhong, and the ripple effects of his treachery. They would analyze King Sejong's decisive actions, praising his wisdom and strength. They would even speculate on the fate of two minor artists, Seo Jiang and Choi Bi, caught up in the whirlwind of events. Did they, some historians would wonder, ever finally collaborate on their clay doll project? Or did the tumultuous night forever shatter their artistic dreams? The answer, lost to the mists of time, remains a subject of ongoing scholarly debate. The icy grip of winter had loosened its hold on the stream. Where weeks ago brittle, sharp edges of ice had reflected my own fractured thoughts, now water gurgled and chuckled its way over smooth stones, a restless, joyful dance beneath the strengthening spring sun. The air, once sharp and biting, carried the sweet scent of thawing earth and the distant promise of blossoms. I sat on the bank, the damp soil a cool contrast to the warmth on my face, and traced the stream's path with my eyes, following it as it wound its way down the mountainside. This stream. It had been a constant companion during those turbulent weeks, a silent witness to my fear and uncertainty. Frozen and still, it had mirrored my own inner turmoil, a reflection of the disorder that had threatened to consume not just me, but the entire village. Now fluid and vibrant, it spoke of renewal, of the inevitable turning of seasons, of the restoration of balance. Joseon society, I knew, placed immense value on order, on the proper alignment of all things. The stream, in its thawing, echoed that deep-seated cultural belief, a return to the natural rhythm, a reaffirmation of the world's inherent harmony. I reached into my satchel and carefully withdrew the small clay doll I had fashioned during the long nights. It was a simple thing, rough and unpolished, but imbued with a quiet sincerity. I placed it gently on a moss-covered rock near the water's edge, a small gesture of thanks, an offering to the unseen spirits of the mountain. These spirits, the mountain gods, the stream guardians, were a palpable presence in our lives. We made offerings, not out of fear, but out of respect, acknowledging their role in the delicate balance of the world. A simple clay doll, a silent prayer for continued protection, a hope for continued peace. It was a common practice, this offering of gratitude, to the spirits that resided in the natural world. It was a way of acknowledging the interconnectedness of all things, our place within the larger tapestry of existence. I wondered if future generations would understand this connection, this reverence for the natural world. Would they too sit by this stream, feeling the weight of history, the echoes of those who came before? Historians I'd heard still debated the exact confluence of this stream and the towering presence of Bukhansan Mountain. Maps disagreed, old texts contradicted one another, and local legends whispered of hidden tributaries and secret springs. The precise geographical details remained shrouded in a certain mystique, adding another layer to the stream's already potent symbolism. It was a place of transition, a meeting point between the known and the unknown, between the tangible and the ethereal. A shiver ran down my spine, a sudden, unexpected chill that had nothing to do with the thawing air. It was the familiar, creeping sensation of unease, a phantom limb of fear that lingered even now, when the immediate danger had passed. The memories of those weeks were still vivid, etched into my mind with unsettling clarity. The whispers in the dark, the unsettling shadows, the feeling of being watched, hunted. Even now, under the bright spring sun, I couldn't fully shake the feeling that something remained. A subtle discord, a lingering dissonance in the otherwise harmonious melody of the returning spring. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath of the fresh, clean air. The scent of pine needles and damp earth filled my lungs, grounding me in the present. I needed to let go, to allow the stream's steady flow to wash away the lingering remnants of fear. But it was hard. The fear had burrowed deep, taken root in the very core of my being. It was like a stubborn weed, refusing to be uprooted, threatening to choke the fragile seedlings of hope that were beginning to emerge. I opened my eyes again, my gaze returning to the clay doll perched on the rock. It seemed so small, so fragile against the backdrop of the vast mountain. And yet, it represented something powerful, the enduring power of belief, the unwavering hope for peace and harmony. I thought of Hermione, of her soothing voice weaving intricate tales of brave heroes and cunning foxes, of mischievous goblins and benevolent spirits. Her stories, once a simple bedtime ritual, had become a lifeline, a source of strength and solace in the darkest of times. They had transported me to other worlds, filled my imagination with wonder, and given me the courage to face my own fears. I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached my eyes. Hermione's stories had saved me, not just from the fear, but from the despair that threatened to consume me. And now, with the immediate danger past, I found myself craving those stories more than ever. They had become a necessary part of my life, a ritual I couldn't imagine living without. The thought of facing the long nights without the comfort of her voice, without the escape into the world of her stories, filled me with a new kind of unease. It was a silly thought, I knew. A grown woman shouldn't be so reliant on bedtime stories. But the truth was, I probably wouldn't survive without them. Right? The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air grew cooler, and the stream seemed to whisper secrets as it flowed past. I stood up, brushing the damp earth from my clothes. It was time to go back. Time to return to the village, to the familiar routines, to the comforting presence of Hermione and her endless supply of stories. As I turned to leave, I took one last look at the stream, the clay doll, a small, silent sentinel against the gathering dusk. The stream flowed on, carrying with it the echoes of the past, the hopes of the future, and the quiet promise of another story waiting to be told. My fingers, stained ochre and umber, smoothed the clay over the king's cheekbone. It was a familiar ritual by now, the shaping and reshaping of King Sejong's likeness. My first attempt, that clumsy little doll I'd crafted as a child, felt like a lifetime ago. This was different. This Sejong was life-sized, commissioned for the royal courtyard. He sat serenely on his throne, a half-smile playing on his lips, a scroll resting in his lap. Or, at least, he would sit serenely when I was finished. Right now, he looked more contemplative than regal, like he was struggling to recall where he'd left his spectacles. The air in the workshop hung thick, with the earthy scent of clay and the faint sweetness of the rice wine Master O kept hidden beneath his workbench. He'd promised me a taste when the statue was finished, a celebration of my skill, he'd said. But the deadline loomed, a dark cloud over my otherwise pleasant task. "Boy," Master O's voice boomed from across the workshop. "Have you heard the news?" I glanced up, wiping my hands on my apron. "What news, Master?" "The Emperor. He's coming." My heart skipped a beat. The Emperor? Of China? Coming here? To our little corner of Joseon? It felt impossible, like a mythical creature descending from the clouds. "When?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Next month, they say. The whole city's in a frenzy. Preparations are already underway." He shook his head, a mixture of awe and annoyance in his expression. All this fuss for a glorified tax collector. I knew what he meant. Joseon's relationship with the Ming dynasty was complicated. We paid tribute, acknowledged their superiority, but maintained our own distinct culture and identity. It was a delicate dance, a constant negotiation between deference and defiance, and now the Emperor himself was gracing us with his presence. It felt like the entire kingdom held its breath, waiting to see what this visit would bring. Will they close the bathhouses?" I blurted out, the thought suddenly consuming me. My weekly soak was a ritual I cherished, a chance to wash away the clay dust and the worries of the week. The thought of it being disrupted filled me with a peculiar sense of dread. "Master," O chuckled. "Close the bathhouses?" "Boy, You think the emperor has come all this way to inspect our hygiene? More likely they'll paint the streets gold and force us all to wear silk robes we can't afford. He returned to his own work, muttering something about the exorbitant cost of imported paints. I, however, remained frozen, contemplating the implications of this imperial visit. What would it mean for me, for my work, for Joseon? I looked back at the clay sejong, his unfinished face staring back at me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, meticulously crafting an image of our greatest king, a scholar, an inventor, a symbol of Joseon's independent spirit, while the emperor, the embodiment of China's power, was about to descend upon us. It felt unbalanced. I knew that the sejong I was sculpting was, in many ways, an idealized version of the man. Historians still argued over his legacy, debating whether his reign truly represented a golden age. Some pointed to his cultural achievements, the creation of Hangul, the blossoming of the arts, while others highlighted the continuing social inequalities and the ever-present threat from our neighbors. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in the middle, but the statue, like all royal portraits, was meant to convey strength, wisdom, and benevolence. It was a projection, a carefully constructed image meant to inspire awe and respect. I wondered what the emperor would think of it. Would he see it as a tribute to a great leader, or as a subtle assertion of Joseon's cultural identity? Would he even notice the slight curve of the lips, the thoughtful furrow of the brow, the details I'd painstakingly carved to suggest not just regal power, but also a hint of the man behind the crown? The days that followed were a blur of activity. The city buzzed with anticipation. Merchants hawked their wares, hoping to capitalize on the influx of visitors. Officials scurried about, barking orders and overseeing preparations. The air crackled with nervous energy. Even Master O seemed infected by the general frenzy, his usual grumbling replaced by a strange, almost giddy excitement. The bathhouses, thankfully, remained open. As the day of the emperor's arrival approached, I found myself working longer and longer hours, driven by a desire to complete the statue before the city was completely overrun. I lost myself in the work, the rhythmic scraping of my tools a welcome distraction from the mounting tension. I sculpted the folds of the king's robe, the intricate details of his crown, the gentle curve of his hand resting on the scroll. With every stroke, I poured into the clay not just my skill, but also my hopes, my fears, and my anxieties about the future. Finally, on the eve of the emperor's arrival, the statue was finished. I stepped back, exhausted but satisfied, and gazed at my creation. King Sejong sat on his throne, a serene and benevolent presence, a testament to the enduring spirit of Joseon. He was, I thought, my best work yet. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the workshop, I heard the distant sound of drums and trumpets. The emperor had arrived. The city held its breath. And I, a humble sculptor, stood in the quiet of my workshop, wondering what the dawn would bring. The air in the courtyard crackled with nervous energy. Incense burned in ornate brass holders, the smoke curling upwards like the ambitions of the scholars gathered there. We, the brightest minds of the Joseon dynasty, were preparing for the emperor's visit. It wasn't just a visit, it was a showcase. And Chobi's story, well, let's just say we were taking inspiration from it. We weren't recreating the tale verbatim, of course, but the idea of incorporating elements of performance, of weaving a narrative through the presentation of our scholarly achievements, that was something we were all eager to explore. Banners depicting scenes from classic literature hung from the eaves, and musicians tuned their instruments, the melodies echoing the ancient rhythms that pulsed through our very being. My brush hovered over the rice paper, poised like a hawk before its descent. Each stroke was a meditation, a prayer to the ancestors for guidance. The ink flowed, thick and dark, forming the characters with a precision that would make a surgeon envious. Calligraphy wasn't just writing. It was an art, a dance between the hand, the brush, and the ink. It was a visible manifestation of the writer's inner world, a glimpse into the depths of their soul. Every curve, every flick of the wrist, spoke volumes. We were judged not just on the content of our writing, but on the beauty and elegance of its form. The emperor appreciated such artistry, and we were determined to impress him. "The Analects surely," declared Scholar Kim, his voice ringing with certainty. "Its wisdom is timeless, its lessons essential for any ruler." While I respect the Analects, I countered, carefully placing my finished calligraphy scroll on the drawing rack. I believe the Book of Documents would be more appropriate. Its historical accounts offer invaluable insights into the challenges and triumphs of past dynasties. The debate continued, each scholar championing their favored text. These ancient scrolls, some more ancient than my great-grandmother's kimchi recipe, which, let me tell you, has been passed down for generations and is definitely older than any of you, held the wisdom of our ancestors, the accumulated knowledge of centuries. The selection process wasn't simply a matter of choosing a book. It was a matter of choosing the right message, the one most relevant to the current political climate, the one that would resonate most deeply with the emperor. A flicker of movement at the edge of the courtyard caught my eye. Choi Sung, the enigmatic martial arts master, was observing our preparations with an inscrutable expression. His presence was both reassuring and unsettling. Historians still argue about the extent of his involvement in court affairs. Some claim he was nothing more than a skilled swordsman, while others insist he became an instructor to the royal guard, whispering words of strategy and wisdom into the ears of those closest to the emperor. Whatever the truth, his reputation preceded him, and his presence added a layer of intrigue to the already charged atmosphere. I sighed inwardly. While the honor of presenting our work to the emperor was undeniable, I couldn't help but dread the hours of stiff formality that lay ahead. These courtly gatherings were often excruciatingly tedious, filled with endless bowing and scraping and the strained smiles of courtiers vying for favor. If I didn't die of boredom, it would be a miracle. Perhaps I could feign a sudden illness? No, that would be too risky. I'd just have to endure it, reminding myself that this was a small price to pay for the opportunity to showcase my scholarship. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the courtyard. The air vibrated with the sound of tuning instruments, the rustling of silk robes, and the hushed whispers of anticipation. As the emperor's arrival drew nearer, the nervous energy intensified. We adjusted our robes, smoothed our hair, and practiced our greetings, ensuring that every gesture and inflection was perfectly calibrated. This was more than just a welcome. It was a performance. We were not just scholars. We were actors on the grand stage of the Joseon court, playing our parts in a centuries-old drama. And tonight, the emperor was our audience. Scholar Park cleared his throat, drawing our attention. "Remember," he said, his voice low and steady, "our debates must be spirited, yet respectful. We must demonstrate our knowledge, but also our humility." He paused, a sly smile playing on his lips. After all, scholarly debate is a form of entertainment in these hallowed halls. Let us give the emperor a show he won't soon forget. We nodded in agreement, a mixture of excitement and trepidation swirling within us. The torches were lit, casting flickering shadows on the walls, transforming the courtyard into a magical space. The musicians began to play, the melodies weaving a tapestry of sound that resonated with the ancient rhythms of our heritage. We took our places, each of us holding a carefully chosen scroll, each of us ready to present the fruits of our intellectual labors. The emperor was coming, and we were ready to welcome him with the full force of our scholarly prowess. This wasn't just a presentation of knowledge. It was a spectacle, a performance designed to dazzle and delight, to educate and entertain. And who knows, perhaps amidst the serious discussions of classical texts and historical precedents, I might actually manage to enjoy myself. Just don't tell anyone I said that. The sun beat down on the polished tiles of the courtyard, reflecting a blinding glare that made the air shimmer. Even the shade offered by the intricately carved eaves provided little respite from the oppressive summer heat. Sweat beaded on my brow, plastering loose strands of hair to my skin. My silks, chosen for their vibrant colors to impress the emperor, felt heavy and suffocating. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, trying to ease the ache in my back from holding the heavy presentation box. The air crackled with anticipation, a palpable buzz running through the assembled dignitaries. Finally, a fanfare of horns split the silence, echoing across the vast expanse of the palace grounds. The emperor's arrival. If the winter procession had been impressive, this summer spectacle was truly breathtaking. Gone were the heavy furs and muted colors, replaced by shimmering silks of every imaginable hue. The emperor, carried aloft in a sedan chair, draped with gold and crimson, looked like a deity descending from the heavens. Attendants fanned him with enormous plumed fans, while others scattered fragrant petals in his path. The procession stretched as far as the eye could see, a river of color and movement flowing through the heart of the empire. Musicians played elaborate melodies on flutes and lutes, the sound mingling with the rhythmic chanting of the honor guard. It was a display of power and wealth designed to awe and intimidate, and it certainly succeeded. As the procession came to a halt before the dais, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the backdrop of the sudden silence. This was it. Years of preparation, months of travel, all culminating in this single moment. With a deep breath, I stepped forward, my hands carefully cradling the ornate box containing my tribute. Inside lay the fruits of my labor, meticulously crafted calligraphy scrolls featuring classical texts, each carefully chosen to appeal to the emperor's known intellectual vanity. The Templescorasos of Confucius, the Tao Te Ching, the Art of War, works that spoke of wisdom, strategy, and the proper governance of a vast empire. I had poured my heart and soul into each stroke of the brush, each carefully chosen character, hoping that my efforts would be recognized and appreciated. Bowing low before the emperor, I presented the box with trembling hands. A servant stepped forward to receive it, placing it carefully at the emperor's feet. He gestured for it to be opened, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. As the lid was lifted, revealing the scrolls within, a slow smile spread across his face. He picked up one of the scrolls, unrolling it with deliberate care, his eyes scanning the intricate characters. "Exquisite," he murmured, his voice smooth as a well-worn jade pendant. "Truly exquisite. The brushstrokes are masterful, the choice of texts impeccable. You have a rare talent, scholar." His words, though few, were laden with praise, a balm to my anxious heart. The tension that had been knotting my stomach for weeks finally began to ease. He examined each scroll in turn, showering me with compliments and inquiries about my techniques and inspiration. He seemed genuinely impressed, his questions insightful and demonstrating a true understanding of the art form. It was clear that his intellectual vanity was not merely a facade. He possessed a genuine appreciation for scholarship and artistry. Later, as I retreated from the dais, my head still spinning from the encounter, I couldn't help but wonder about the vastness of the emperor's wealth. Jade, so highly prized by Chinese emperors, adorned his robes, his throne, even the handles of his fans. It glittered everywhere, a testament to his power and influence. It made me think about Chobi's tales of the Jade Mountains, filled with veins of the precious stone stretching deep into the earth. Historians still debate whether his stories were grounded in historical fact, or were flights of fancy embellished for the sake of entertainment. Either way, they sparked the imagination, painting vivid pictures of unimaginable riches. Standing there, surrounded by the opulence of the imperial court, I couldn't help but ponder, what do they do with all that jade? Do they have vast vaults overflowing with it? Mountains of it piled high, gleaming in the darkness? The thought was almost overwhelming. The sheer scale of the emperor's wealth was difficult to comprehend. It was a world apart from my own humble existence, a world of unimaginable luxury and excess. The hall shimmered. Torches blazed in intricate sconces shaped like mythical phoenixes, casting a warm glow over tables that groaned under the weight of the feast. I'd seen merchants hawk spices and dried fruits from faraway lands, bragging about their exotic nature. But this was a different level. Dishes I couldn't even name, aromas that mingled sweet and savory, spicy and earthy, filled the air. Remember that goat cheese we had back in the village? That dusty, crumbly wedge? This was like comparing a single, bleeding goat to a whole symphony orchestra composed entirely of goats, playing instruments crafted from the finest aged cheddar. There were shimmering mounds of rice-dyed vibrant hues, platters piled high with glistening meats, and bowls brimming with sauces that promised both delight and potential intestinal distress. Even the fruits were extraordinary, plump, juicy things I'd never laid eyes on before, some resembling jewels, others like miniature, edible suns. I navigated the throng, my plate already dangerously laden, trying to maintain a semblance of grace. The emperor's officials, resplendent in their silken robes, moved with an almost serpentine elegance, I found myself engaged in polite, yet utterly vapid conversations, each one more carefully constructed than a court eunuch guarding the imperial bedchamber. One official, his face as smooth and unreadable as polished jade, inquired about my journey, expressing his deepest sympathies for the inconveniences I had surely faced. I, in turn, assured him that the journey had been nothing short of enlightening, conveniently omitting the part where I'd nearly been swallowed whole by a bog monster. Another, his mustache meticulously waxed into 2 perfect upward curls, questioned me about the customs of my homeland. I regaled him with fabricated tales of cheese-rolling festivals and ritualistic goat sacrifices, praying he wouldn't ask for specifics. It was a delicate dance, this courtly conversation, a constant tiptoeing around any topic of actual substance. It's no wonder, really. I'd read enough dusty scrolls to know feasts like these were crucial parts of diplomacy. A show of wealth and power. A chance to subtly size up potential allies and enemies. While we were all smiles and polite nods, I knew that beneath the surface, every word, every gesture, was being scrutinized, analyzed, dissected. The emperor himself sat upon a raised dais, observing the proceedings with a hawk-like gaze. He raised a jeweled goblet in a toast, and the hall erupted in cheers. I joined in, hoping my forced smile didn't look too strained. The wine flowed freely, potent stuff that tasted of sunshine and fire. I reminded myself, not for the first time, that moderation was key. I'd seen seasoned warriors felled by the emperor's vintage, waking days later with memories as hazy as a desert mirage. If I wasn't careful, I'd be spending the next few days praying to the porcelain god, and that wouldn't exactly enhance my reputation at court. You probably won't survive the hangovers if you're not careful, pal. My inner voice sounded suspiciously like a grumpy tavern owner. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere grew more relaxed, the conversations louder and less guarded. Music filled the air, played on strange, stringed instruments that resembled elongated lutes. Dancers, clad in shimmering silks, moved with a grace that bordered on the ethereal. I found myself caught up in the revelry, the worries of my mission momentarily forgotten. But then, a flicker of movement caught my eye, a shadowed figure, slipping discreetly through a tapestry-hung doorway at the far end of the hall. It was just a glimpse, but something about the figure's posture, the way they moved, stirred a memory. Anjong, the disgraced minister, imprisoned for treason, supposedly languishing in the dungeons beneath the palace. Historians still debate his fate. Some claim he died in his cell, a broken man. Others whisper of a secret escape route, a hidden tunnel leading out of the palace and into the city beyond. A tunnel that, according to certain less than reputable sources, began behind that very tapestry. The memory of that dusty scroll, filled with cryptic symbols and half-legible scribbles, flashed in my mind. The passage described a hidden lever, concealed within the mouth of a carved dragon, part of the tapestry's intricate design. If the rumors were true, I excused myself from the conversation I was having, feigning a sudden need for fresh air. The officials, deep in their cups, barely registered my departure. I made my way towards the tapestry, my heart pounding in my chest. Could it really be true? Could Anjong have actually escaped? And if so, what secrets did he carry with him? The tapestry loomed before me, a swirling depiction of dragons and phoenixes, woven with threads of gold and silver. I ran my hand over the cool fabric, searching for the hidden lever. My fingers brushed against something hard, concealed within the gaping maw of a particularly fierce-looking dragon. I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing. This could be a trap. Or it could be the key to unraveling the mystery that had brought me here. I took a deep breath and pressed the lever. The hall shimmered. A kaleidoscope of silk robes and the gleam of polished jade. The air, thick with the aroma of roasted pheasant and spiced wine, vibrated with the low hum of polite conversation. The emperor, enthroned upon a dais draped in crimson and gold, surveyed his assembled guests with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Earlier, that smile had seemed benevolent, almost fatherly. Now, beneath the flickering lamplight, it seemed brittle, like a thin sheet of ice over a fast-flowing river. I sipped my wine, the sweet rice liquor doing little to quell the unease churning in my stomach. The feast, meant to celebrate the successful completion of the imperial examinations, felt strained, the forced gaiety a stark contrast to the tension crackling in the air. The Emperor's jade pendant, the one he constantly stroked, the one so smooth it seemed to glow with an inner light, now bore a noticeable chip near the bottom. I hadn't noticed it earlier, but now, in the shifting light, it was impossible to miss. A small flaw, perhaps, but a significant one. A crack in the jade facade, a glimpse of the rough stone beneath. The music swelled, a crescendo of plucked strings and tinkling bells, signaling the end of the first course. Servants, swift and silent as shadows, cleared the remnants of the feast, replacing the platters with fresh bowls of steaming rice and fragrant vegetables. The Emperor raised a hand, silencing the musicians. A hush fell over the hall, heavy and expectant. He cleared his throat, the sound amplified in the sudden silence. "Honored scholars," he began, his voice smooth as polished jade. "I am pleased to see you gathered here tonight, celebrating your achievements. Your wisdom and dedication bring honor to our great nation." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled scholars. My fellow examinees shifted uncomfortably, sensing the change in the atmosphere. The Emperor's smile had vanished, replaced by a thin, hard line. "However," he continued, his voice now edged with steel, "there remains one oversight, a small matter easily rectified." He leaned forward, his eyes glittering. "As a token of your continued loyalty and respect, I require a supplemental tribute." He paused again, letting the words hang in the air. A ripple of murmurs passed through the assembled scholars. Supplemental tribute? What could he possibly want? We had already presented the customary gifts of silk, tea, and handcrafted porcelain. Hadn't we given enough? The Emperor leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips. "I require," he announced, his voice ringing with an almost childish glee, "a root of 100-year-old wild ginseng, flawless, unblemished, delivered to the palace by sunrise." The murmurs erupted into a cacophony of whispers and gasps. 100-year-old wild ginseng? It was a request so audacious, so outlandish, it was like a beggar asking for silk robes and a jeweled crown. One might as well ask for a dragon scale or a phoenix feather. Such roots were the stuff of legends, whispered about in hushed tones, their medicinal properties said to grant immortality. Even the wealthiest merchants would be hard-pressed to acquire such a treasure, let alone a group of newly appointed scholars. The joke, if it was one, landed with a resounding thud. The air in the hall crackled with indignation. This wasn't just a request. It was a blatant violation of protocol. The imperial examinations were meant to be a celebration of scholarly achievement, not an opportunity for the Emperor to extort rare and valuable treasures. Beside me, Scholar Lee muttered under his breath. "Ginseng for wisdom," he says. "Perhaps he needs a double dose." It was a dangerous sentiment, but one I couldn't help but share. The Emperor's demand was not only unreasonable, it was insulting. It implied that our success in the examinations was not due to our own hard work and dedication, but rather something that could be enhanced or even purchased with a magical root. Scholar Park, ever the diplomat, rose to his feet, his hands clasped respectfully before him. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice carefully neutral, "while we are honored to offer tribute, acquiring such a rare and precious item on such short notice would be challenging. Perhaps." The Emperor cut him off with a wave of his hand. "Challenges," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "are meant to be overcome. I trust you will not disappoint me." He rose from his throne, his eyes sweeping over the assembled scholars, lingering for a moment on each face. A silent challenge, a test of our loyalty, our obedience. He turned and strode from the hall, leaving us to stew in our anger and resentment. The feast, once a symbol of celebration, had become a bitter reminder of the Emperor's true nature. The jade mask had slipped, revealing the avarice and arrogance beneath. The chipped pendant, a small but significant detail, now seemed a potent symbol of the flawed man who wore it. The night stretched before us, long and uncertain. The search for the impossible ginseng had begun. The air in the throne room crackled with anticipation. Every eye, every ear was trained on me. I could feel the weight of centuries of Confucian tradition pressing down, suffocating me with its expectation of deference. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drummer keeping time with the blood rushing in my ears. I had just uttered words so audacious, so brazen, that even I, in the echoing silence that followed, wondered if I had gone mad. I had suggested a philosophical debate with the emperor. Me, a lowly scholar, barely a speck of dust in the grand tapestry of the Joseon court, challenging the Son of Heaven himself. It was like a flea challenging a dog to a wrestling match. The flea might have spirit, but the outcome is hardly in doubt. Except, in this case, the dog could squash the flea with a single imperial toe. My gamble stemmed from desperation. The emperor's displeasure was a tangible thing, a cold wind that had swept through the room the moment I'd presented Seojang's dolls. I'd seen that same icy glint in his eyes before. It was the same look he'd given the unfortunate official who'd presented him with a poorly written poem, a look that had preceded a swift and merciless demotion. And before that, it was the same look he'd given the gardener whose prize peonies had wilted in the summer heat. That gardener had been banished to the northern provinces, a fate I was keen to avoid. This icy stare, this frigid aura, was becoming a pattern. It reminded me of that frozen stream beneath Bukhansan, beautiful yet unforgiving. One wrong step, one crack in the ice, and you're plunged into the freezing depths. I was teetering on that crack, the icy water beckoning below. My proposal for a debate, insane as it was, offered a sliver of hope, a chance to shift the narrative. The emperor, despite his formidable presence, prided himself on his intellectual prowess. Perhaps, just perhaps, I could appeal to his scholarly side, divert his attention from the dolls, and steer myself away from the metaphorical icy plunge. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the faint rustle of silk robes. Then, a flicker of amusement danced in the emperor's eyes. "A debate?" he finally asked, his voice a low rumble that resonated through the room. "You dare to challenge me, a scholar, to a battle of wits?" "Your Majesty," I replied, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts, "I merely seek to illuminate the merits of Master Seo's craft through a discourse on the very nature of art and its significance within our esteemed kingdom." A low murmur rippled through the assembled courtiers. Confucianism, the bedrock of Joseon society, emphasized respect for authority, deference to superiors, and the unquestionable supremacy of the emperor. My challenge, however audacious, danced dangerously close to the line of outright disrespect. I could practically feel the disapproving stares of the court officials burning into my back. The emperor leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Very well," he said, a hint of steel in his voice. "You may proceed. But choose your words carefully, scholar, for in this debate, the stakes are higher than you may realize." My stomach lurched. I had anticipated his acceptance, hoped for it even, but now that it had come, a wave of icy fear washed over me. I was trapped. I had leaped from the frying pan into the fire. The icy stream beneath Bukhansan suddenly seemed like a rather appealing alternative. I bowed low, trying to buy myself a few precious moments to gather my thoughts. What could I possibly argue that would not only appease the emperor, but also save my own skin? My mind raced, scrambling for a strategy, a foothold in this precarious intellectual climb. Historians, I recalled, still debate the true reach of Seojang's artistry. Some claimed his dolls achieved international fame, even becoming treasured gifts for the Chinese emperor as tribute. Could I weave this into my argument? Could I somehow elevate the dolls from mere playthings to symbols of Joseon's artistic prowess, worthy of even the Celestial Empire's admiration? It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was the only card I had left to play. I straightened, took a deep breath, and began. "Your Majesty, I propose that we consider the very essence of art." My words flowed, weaving a tapestry of arguments, drawing upon philosophical principles, historical precedents, and even a sprinkle of carefully crafted flattery. I spoke of the dolls not as mere toys, but as embodiments of Joseon's unique cultural heritage, as miniature ambassadors of our kingdom's artistic spirit. I tread carefully, navigating the treacherous waters of court etiquette, always mindful of the emperor's keen intellect and even keener temper. I knew that my survival hinged on my ability to convince him. I had to be not just clever, I had to be brilliant. I had to be a rhetorical acrobat, juggling logic and flattery, historical fact and artistic interpretation, all while keeping a respectful, even subservient, demeanor. The odds of success were slim. Let's be honest. They were microscopic. It was like hoping to win the lottery while simultaneously being struck by lightning, twice. But as I continued my carefully constructed argument, a sliver of hope, however faint, flickered within me. Perhaps, just perhaps, this audacious gambit might just pay off. The air crackled with anticipation. The courtyard, usually filled with the rustle of scholars' robes and the murmur of quiet study, was now buzzing with a different energy. Every eye was on the raised platform where I stood, facing Choi Sang. He held no sword today, his hands clasped calmly before him, but the glint in his eyes was as sharp as any blade I had ever seen. The debate had begun. "So, Scholar Min," Choi Sang began, his voice smooth as polished jade, "you claim that words are weapons, sharper even than the finest sword. A bold claim. Perhaps you would care to demonstrate?" He gestured towards the assembled scholars, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. My own hand instinctively went to the worn silk of my sleeve, a nervous habit I'd yet to break. I took a breath, steadying myself. Indeed, Choi Sang, words can build bridges, they can mend broken hearts, but they can also tear down empires and incite the darkest of passions. Are these not the actions of weapons, perhaps even more potent than steel? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Choi Sang inclined his head, a flicker of acknowledgement in his eyes. A clever analogy, Scholar Min. But analogies alone do not constitute proof. You speak of empires and passions. Tell me then, what good are such lofty ideals when one lacks the very means to survive? What good are words when one starves? He knew my position, of course. He knew my argument would center on virtue, not material wealth. He was trying to goad me, to force me into a defensive stance. But I wouldn't be swayed. "Survival," Choi Sang, I countered, my voice gaining strength, "is not simply the prolonging of breath in the body. True survival, true life, is found in the cultivation of virtue. Confucius himself taught us that righteousness is the foundation of a stable society, the very bedrock upon which a prosperous nation is built. What good is a mountain of ginseng if the heart is rotten? It nourishes the body, perhaps, but what of the soul?" Choi Sang chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. The soul, a nebulous concept, Scholar Min, difficult to grasp, even more difficult to quantify. Ginseng, on the other hand, is tangible. Its value is readily apparent. It can be traded. It can be consumed. It can sustain life. Can virtue do the same? "Virtue sustains the very fabric of society," I retorted, my voice rising slightly. "It fosters trust, encourages cooperation, and promotes justice. These are the pillars of a thriving community, far more valuable than any earthly possession. A man may hoard ginseng, he may build walls of gold around himself, but without virtue, he is but a lonely island, adrift in a sea of his own making." I saw a flicker of something in Choi Sang's eyes. Annoyance? Respect? It was hard to tell. He paced slowly before the assembled scholars, his hands now clasped behind his back. "You speak eloquently, Scholar Min, but you rely on abstract concepts. Tell me, can your virtue deflect a blow? Can your righteousness fill an empty belly?" "A blow delivered in anger breeds only more anger," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "A belly filled through injustice will only crave more. True sustenance comes not from material wealth, but from a clear conscience and a life lived in accordance with righteous principles." I could feel the energy in the courtyard shifting. The initial amusement of the onlookers had given way to something more serious. They were listening, truly listening. Some even leaned forward, captivated by the back and forth. I knew some scholars held the belief that these debates, these clashes of ideology, could influence the very flow of cosmic energy, shaping the destiny of the kingdom. Whether that was true or not, I felt a weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. Choi Sang stopped pacing and turned back to face me. He regarded me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You persist in your idealism, Scholar Min. Admirable, perhaps, but ultimately impractical. The world is a harsh place, governed by tangible realities, not lofty ideals. Power resides in those who control resources, not in those who preach virtue. True power, I countered, meeting his gaze directly, resides not in what we control, but in who we are. A man who rules through fear and intimidation may command obedience, but he will never earn respect. A man who governs with virtue and wisdom, however, will inspire loyalty and devotion, creating a society that thrives not just materially, but spiritually as well. I paused, allowing my words to hang in the air. The silence that followed was profound. Even Choi Sang seemed momentarily taken aback. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't the condescending smirk he had worn earlier. This smile held a hint of genuine amusement, perhaps even a flicker of admiration. "Well spoken, Scholar Min," he finally said, his voice laced with a newfound respect. "You have presented a compelling argument. While I may not fully agree with your conclusions, I cannot deny the strength of your convictions. Perhaps," he added, a twinkle in his eye, "there is more to this virtue of yours than I initially thought." The tension in the courtyard dissipated, replaced by a hum of excited conversation. The debate was far from over, but I knew, in that moment, that I had planted a seed of an idea. And sometimes, an idea can be the most powerful weapon of all. The Emperor's face, moments ago a thundercloud promising a deluge of imperial wrath, now held a flicker of, was it amusement? His fingers, the same ones that had gripped the armrests of his throne so tightly they'd gone numb, now dabbed at the sweat beading on his brow. The chipped pendant, nestled against my chest beneath my robes, felt strangely warm. Perhaps it was just the stifling air of the court, but in that moment, I dared to hope. My audacious arguments, laced with just the right amount of deference and sprinkled with quotations from revered philosophers, and, admittedly, a touch of veiled threat regarding the stability of the realm, seemed to have struck a chord. He hadn't expected such a forceful, reasoned rebuttal. He'd expected groveling. He'd expected fear. He certainly hadn't expected a lecture on the philosophical implications of ginseng cultivation quotas. He shifted on his throne, the silk of his robes rustling like dry leaves. The silence in the court stretched, taut as a bowstring. Finally he spoke. His voice, though still resonant with authority, lacked the sharp edge it had possessed just moments before. The court, he declared, will reconsider its position on the ginseng quotas. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the assembled scholars. The tension that had knotted our stomachs loosened, replaced by a giddy sense of triumph. The shift in power was more subtle than the change of seasons, less dramatic than the passing of a monsoon, yet more profound than either. It's almost as if someone replaced the Emperor's morning tea with a calming chamomile blend instead of the usual fire ant brew. But that's just speculation, of course. As everyone knows, diplomacy often involved these sorts of subtle negotiations, the whispers and nuances carrying more weight than the shouts and decrees. We filed out of the court, our steps lighter than they had been upon entering. The taste of victory was sweeter than the finest honey wine, a vintage so exquisite it made you forget the existence of rice cakes. Remember that honey wine? The one that vanished so quickly during the last Imperial Stargazing Festival? Let's just say some scholars have acquisitive tendencies, especially when it comes to fermented beverages. Later, gathered in the scholars' garden, we celebrated our small but significant victory. We shared stories of the court, mimicking the Emperor's expressions and exaggerating our own bravery, the tension of the morning melting away with each shared laugh. The ginseng debate, at least for the moment, was behind us. Old Scholar Park, his beard quivering with mirth, leaned in conspiratorially. "Did you see the Emperor's face when you mentioned the you-know-the-word?" he whispered. I knew exactly which word he meant. It was one of those words that certain Joseon scholars believed held mystical power, capable of influencing the very fabric of reality. A word not to be uttered lightly. A word reserved for moments of great import. I had woven it subtly into my argument, a linguistic charm against the Emperor's decree. Had it worked? Who could say? But the Emperor's reaction, well, let's just say it lent credence to the theory. The debate over the ginseng quota, while seemingly trivial, had represented something far greater, a struggle for influence, a test of wills between the Emperor and the scholarly class. Our victory, however small, had sent a clear message. The scholars would not be silenced. We would continue to advocate for the well-being of the realm, even if it meant facing the wrath of the Dragon Throne. Of course, historians still argue about the whole thing. Some claim the ginseng debate never happened, that it's a fanciful tale passed down through generations of scholars, embellished with each retelling. They point to the lack of official documentation, the almost mythical aura that surrounds the story. They scoff at the notion of words holding mystical power, dismissing it as superstitious nonsense. Others, however, insist that the debate did occur, that the story, though perhaps embellished, holds a kernel of truth. They argue that the absence of official records is precisely what one would expect, given the sensitive nature of the incident. After all, which emperor would want to immortalize a moment where he was outwitted by a group of bookish scholars? Whether the ginseng debate took place as described, or is entirely fictional, is a matter of ongoing scholarly discussion. But one thing is certain. The story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of speaking truth to power, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. And who knows, perhaps, just perhaps, there's more to the power of words than we realize. Perhaps, in the right hands and at the right moment, they can indeed shape the destiny of empires. The dust settled on the once vibrant streets of Gaegyong. Gone were the flamboyant banners, the cacophony of celebratory gongs, the jostling crowds eager for a glimpse of the emperor. The grand procession that had marked his arrival, a vibrant river of silks and shining armor, had dwindled to a somber stream. The emperor's palanquin, once borne aloft with an almost frantic energy, now moved with a subdued, almost hesitant pace. The accompanying soldiers, their faces grim, marched with the weary air of men who had seen too much. Remember the wedding parade? That riot of color and sound, a spectacle designed to awe and impress? This was a retreat. The air, thick with the unspoken tension of a kingdom holding its breath, seemed to cling to the departing entourage. Even the emperor's normally boisterous laughter, which had echoed through the palace halls during the wedding festivities, was absent. The silence was punctuated only by the rhythmic thud of the palanquin-bearers' feet and the occasional jingle of harness. The opulence remained, the silks, the gold, the jade, but it was muted, overshadowed by the pervasive atmosphere of unease. Later that day, a small contingent of royal guards arrived at my modest dwelling. Their leader, a stern-faced man, with a carefully trimmed mustache, presented me with a gift from the emperor himself. No, not ginseng root, though I admit I wouldn't have turned my nose up at a prime specimen. This was something far more precious, something that resonated with a deeper part of me. Within intricately carved wooden chests, nestled in layers of silk padding, lay a collection of books. Not just any books, mind you. These were rare and ancient texts, their pages filled with the wisdom of generations past. Philosophical treatises, historical chronicles, collections of poetry, a treasure trove of knowledge that would have made a scholar weep with joy. Back then, remember, books weren't the readily available commodity they are now. The creation of each volume was a painstaking process, each character meticulously brushed onto the page. These books weren't just repositories of knowledge. They were works of art, symbols of power and prestige, far more valuable than any amount of ginseng. The emperor, in his wisdom, or perhaps prompted by those closest to him, recognized the role I had played in the recent events. He understood the value of quiet observation, of careful deduction, of understanding the currents that flowed beneath the surface of courtly life. These books, he indicated through his messenger, were a token of his gratitude for my discretion. Running my fingers over the smooth covers, I felt a thrill of excitement course through me. This was more than a reward. It was a validation, a recognition of the power of intellect, of the importance of seeing beyond the obvious. It was, in its own way, a far greater honor than any official title. And now, I suppose you're probably wondering how much longer this is going to take. Seriously, though, bear with me. The tapestry of history, much like a particularly intricate knot, takes time to unravel. The emperor's departure marked a significant turning point. The court, still buzzing with the aftershocks of the recent upheaval, began the slow process of returning to a semblance of normalcy. But beneath the surface, the currents of intrigue continued to swirl. Alliances shifted, whispers filled the corridors, and the game of power continued, albeit in a more subdued fashion. One question that continues to be debated by historians even to this day is the nature of my relationship with Seojung following the emperor's departure. Some scholars, citing fragmented court records and anecdotal evidence, maintain that I became his official advisor, whispering words of wisdom into his ear and guiding him through the treacherous waters of court politics. They paint me as a shadowy figure, pulling the strings from behind the scenes, manipulating events to my own ends. Others dismiss this notion entirely. They argue that my involvement was limited to the events surrounding the wedding, a brief flicker of influence that quickly faded into obscurity. They point to the lack of concrete evidence, the absence of my name in official documents, as proof that my role was minimal at best. The truth, as is often the case, likely lies somewhere in between. While there's no definitive proof of a formal advisory role, it's not unreasonable to assume that Seojung, having witnessed my abilities firsthand, would have sought my counsel from time to time. Whether he heeded that counsel is another matter entirely. Court politics, as I've mentioned before, are a complex and ever-shifting landscape. Influencing events is like trying to steer a ship in a storm. Even the most skilled navigator can be at the mercy of the winds and waves. So the question remains, did I become Seojung's advisor? The historical record is silent, the evidence ambiguous. Perhaps it's best to leave it as a mystery, a tantalizing question for future generations to ponder. After all, a little bit of mystery keeps history interesting, doesn't it? The thawing stream, I remember it well, the icy grip of winter loosening its hold, the gurgle of nascent life returning to the mountain. It called to me then, as it does now, a siren song of tranquility. Bukhansan, a stoic giant watching over the bustling city of Hanyang, offered a refuge, a small hermitage nestled amongst its folds, far from the intrigues of court and the weight of responsibility. Here, beneath the watchful gaze of ancient granite, I sought not escape, but understanding, peace perhaps, and most certainly, inspiration. The hermitage is Spartan, a single room offering little more than shelter from the elements. A low table, a sleeping mat, and stacks of paper are my only companions. The flickering lamplight dances on the rough-hewn walls, casting long, dancing shadows that seem to whisper secrets gleaned from the mountain itself. Here, I write. Philosophical essays, each sentence more carefully crafted than a potter's vase. Though I admit, finding the right metaphor for the ephemeral nature of time has proven rather sticky. Days melt into weeks, marked only by the changing light filtering through the single window and the dwindling stack of blank pages. The ink bleeds into the porous paper, each stroke a testament to the slow, deliberate rhythm of life here. Away from the hurried pace of the capital, the constant demands on my attention, my mind finally finds the stillness it craves. I reflect on the nature of leadership, a burden I carried for so long. The weight of a nation, the hopes and fears of a people, rested upon my shoulders. Was I wise enough? Just enough? Did I lead with compassion and foresight, or was I blinded by the machinations of power? These questions, once a dull ache in the back of my mind, now resonate with a clarity that both frightens and invigorates. The Joseon scholars of old, they understood the power of these sacred spaces. They knew that wisdom wasn't found in dusty scrolls and crowded lecture halls, but in the quiet contemplation of nature. Mountains, they believed, were conduits to the divine, places where the veil between the earthly and the celestial thinned. I can understand their reasoning now, feeling a palpable energy thrumming beneath the very floorboards of this humble dwelling. Bukhansan breathes, a living entity, ancient and wise. It whispers secrets on the wind, lessons etched in the weathered stone. Responsibility. It's a word that echoes in the stillness of the hermitage. The responsibility of leadership is not merely about issuing decrees and enacting policies. It's about understanding the deeper currents that shape a nation's destiny, the hopes and dreams that reside in the hearts of its people. It's about nurturing those hopes, guiding them towards a brighter future, even when the path ahead is shrouded in uncertainty. I think of the farmers toiling in the rice paddies, their backs bent under the scorching sun. I think of the merchants haggling in the marketplace, their voices a vibrant tapestry of commerce. I think of the scholars poring over ancient texts, seeking knowledge that will illuminate the world. These are the people I served, the people whose lives I held in my hands. Did I serve them well? The mountains hold no answers, of course. They simply offer a space for reflection, a canvas upon which to paint the complexities of thought and emotion. The wind rustling through the pine trees becomes a chorus of voices, each whispering a different perspective, a different interpretation of the past. I listen, absorbing their wisdom, letting it seep into my bones. The stream, that thawing stream, continues its relentless journey down the mountainside. It carves its path through rock and earth, a testament to the persistent power of nature. It reminds me that life, like the stream, is a constant flow, a continuous process of change and adaptation. We cannot cling to the past, nor can we predict the future with certainty. All we can do is navigate the present with wisdom and compassion, striving to create a world where all can thrive. Here, beneath the mountain, I find not absolution, but acceptance. Acceptance of the past, with all its triumphs and failures. Acceptance of the present, with its uncertainties and challenges. And acceptance of the future, with its promise of new beginnings. The hermitage has become my crucible, a place where I can refine my thoughts, purify my intentions, and emerge, hopefully, with a renewed sense of purpose. The ink flows, the pages fill, and slowly, painstakingly, I begin to understand. The responsibility of wisdom is not about possessing all the answers, but about asking the right questions. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of all things, the delicate balance that sustains life. It's about embracing the journey, not just the destination. And it's about remembering, always, the thawing stream, the mountain's gentle reminder that even in the depths of winter, the promise of spring remains. The wind, sharp and cold as shattered jade, clawed at the thin fabric of my robe. I huddled deeper into the meager warmth it offered, watching the swirling snow obscure the familiar landscape. Another winter. Another season of biting frost gnawing at my bones. I swear, if I don't find a patron soon, or at least someone willing to donate a thicker robe, I'll be a Choi Sang-shaped icicle by spring. A flurry of movement at the edge of the clearing caught my eye. Figures, bundled against the elements, struggled through the drifts. They moved with a familiar determination, a purposefulness I recognized from years past. Students. This new generation, as persistent and inquisitive as summer mosquitoes. Master Choi Sang, one called, his voice muffled by the thick wool wrapped around his face. The others echoed the greeting, their breaths clouding the air like miniature spirit dragons. I sighed, a plume of white joining theirs. So, the wind carries you back to this old hermit's doorstep. What burning questions now occupy your scholarly minds? They crowded around, shedding layers of furs and scarves like ceremonial offerings. Their faces, young and eager, shone with an intellectual hunger I knew well. It warmed me more than any fire ever could. Master, began the first, a bright-eyed young man named Ji-hoon, we've been studying your essays on the nature of governance. We find ourselves perplexed. Perplexed, are you? I chuckled, a dry rasp in the cold air. And by what particular conundrum are you so afflicted? Another student, a serious young woman named Sun-hee, stepped forward. You speak of the importance of virtue in leadership, of the ruler's responsibility to the ruled. Yet, you also advocate for practicality, for adapting to the changing tides of the world. How do these two seemingly disparate philosophies reconcile? I smiled. These were good questions, the kind that sparked true learning, true understanding. I gestured towards the small, ramshackle hut behind me. Come in, come in. Let us discuss this over some tea. Or rather, hot water with a few wilted leaves. My current circumstances don't allow for much luxury. Inside the hut, huddled around the flickering embers of a small fire, I began to explain, drawing on years of study, contemplation, and the occasional, unavoidable bout of utter bewilderment. I spoke of the clay dolls I used to craft in my youth, each one representing a different aspect of human nature. How, like a ruler, the craftsman must understand the inherent qualities of the clay, its strengths and weaknesses, to mold it into something beautiful and functional. I talked about balance, the delicate dance between principle and pragmatism. How a ruler, like a potter, must possess both a firm hand and a gentle touch. They must hold fast to their ideals, their vision for a just and prosperous society, yet be willing to adapt their methods, to bend and shape their approach to fit the ever-shifting realities of the world. Think of it like this, I said, picking up a small, cracked clay doll from a dusty shelf. This doll represents unwavering adherence to principle. Admirable, yes, but also brittle. Too rigid, too inflexible. See how easily it breaks under pressure? I gently tapped the doll, and a small piece chipped off, falling to the earthen floor. The students leaned in, their eyes fixed on the broken figure. And this, I continued, holding up another doll, this one smooth and rounded, almost amorphous, represents pure pragmatism. Adaptable, yes, but also lacking a core, a guiding principle. It can be molded into any shape, but what is its purpose? What does it stand for? The students were silent, absorbing the lesson. I could see the wheels turning in their minds, grappling with the complexities of the concepts I presented. This was the essence of mentorship. The passing down of knowledge not just as information but as a way of thinking, a way of seeing the world. It was the heart of Confucian education, the legacy I hoped to leave behind. Hours passed in lively discussion, the students peppering me with questions, challenging my assertions, pushing me to clarify my thoughts. This was the way learning should be. A dynamic exchange, a collaborative exploration of ideas. As the sun began to set, painting the snow-covered landscape in hues of orange and purple, the students prepared to leave. Ji-hoon, the bright-eyed young man, lingered by the door. "Master," he said hesitantly, "there's something we've been meaning to ask. The historians, they disagree about your relationship with Seo-jang. Some claim he became your patron, providing for your needs in your later years. Others say there's no evidence to support this claim." I sighed. This again. The rumors of Seo-jang's patronage had followed me for years. The truth, as always, was far more mundane. "Let the historians argue," I said with a shrug. "Their debates provide them with something to do. The truth is, Seo-jang and I shared a few cups of tea, discussed philosophy, and then went our separate ways. He appreciated my intellect, but his appreciation didn't extend to providing me with a decent winter robe." I shivered, pulling the threadbare garment tighter around me, which, as you can see, is a rather pressing concern. The students chuckled, understanding the underlying plea in my jest. They bowed respectfully and disappeared into the swirling snow, leaving me alone once more in the quiet of my humble dwelling. The fire had dwindled to embers, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. I looked around at the scattered clay dolls, each one a testament to a life spent in pursuit of knowledge, understanding, and, let's be honest, a slightly warmer robe. Perhaps this new generation, these bright young minds, would carry the torch forward, illuminate the path for those who followed. Perhaps they would even remember their old master, the one who taught them about virtue, pragmatism, and the enduring importance of a good tailor. Perhaps. Or perhaps they'd just remember the crazy old man who talked to clay dolls. Either way, the legacy, like the wind and the snow, would find its own way. The cool spray of the stream kissed my face, a familiar comfort. The same stream, the same smooth stones I'd used as a seat countless times since I'd arrived in this strange yet increasingly familiar time. My eyes were closed, my breathing slow and even, seeking the quiet center within the swirling chaos of recent events. But the quiet wouldn't come. A faint rustling, like silk brushing against silk, tickled the edge of my hearing. It wasn't the leaves. They hung still and heavy in the humid air. It wasn't the water. Its song was a constant, soothing murmur. This was something else. It grew, a susurrus that seemed to emanate from the very heart of Bukhansan, carried on the faintest of breezes. Whispers, indistinct and fragmented, yet charged with an undeniable energy. Bukhansan, the mountain that loomed over Hanyang, a silent guardian of secrets. The mountain where I'd first arrived. The mountain that held, according to some, a mystical power, a connection to the spirit world. A quirky idea, perhaps, but in a land where shamanism intertwined with Confucianism and Buddhism, where the seen and unseen danced a delicate jig, who was I to dismiss it? The whispers intensified, coalescing into discernible words, fragments of conversations, echoes of decisions made, lives lived, battles fought, and kingdoms won and lost. I heard the names of kings whispered on the wind, tales of ambition and betrayal, of wisdom and folly. Sejong, the name resonated clearly, a bright note in the symphony of whispers. His reign, a time of unprecedented advancement, a golden age for Joseon. Yet, even within that brilliance, shadows lurked. The whispers spoke of Anjong, a name intertwined with Sejong's, yet painted in darker hues. A skilled engineer, credited with perfecting the ondol, the underfloor heating system that brought warmth to Joseon homes. A man who had served Sejong faithfully, contributing to the very foundation of his reign. Yet, the whispers painted a different picture, a picture of simmering resentment, of ambition twisting into something darker, something treacherous. The whispers told a tale of envy, of Anjong's resentment toward Sejong's growing power and the attention he received, particularly from the Emperor of China, who had expressed great interest in the ingenious ondol system. Had Anjong truly plotted to overthrow Sejong to seize the throne for himself? Had the whispers of Chinese recognition fueled his ambition, turning loyalty into bitter rivalry? Historians, even in my own time, debated the truth. Some saw Anjong as a victim of circumstance, a skilled artisan caught in the crosshairs of political intrigue. Others painted him as a cunning opportunist, willing to betray his king for a taste of power. The wind shifted, the whispers fading, leaving me with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. The cycle continued. The same dance of power and wisdom, of ambition and betrayal, that had played out in Sejong's time, echoed through the centuries, as constant as the flow of the stream beside me. Joseon history, like the history of any nation, was a tapestry woven with threads of stability and change, of progress and regression. Sejong's reign, a shining example of advancement, was not immune to the undercurrents of human ambition. Just as the stream before me, seemingly placid on the surface, held hidden currents and eddies, so too did the seemingly serene surface of Joseon society conceal the churning tides of political maneuvering and personal ambition. The whispers, though faded, left an imprint, a deeper understanding of the complex tapestry of Joseon history. The kings and scholars, the engineers and artists, the farmers and merchants, they were all part of this intricate dance, their lives interconnected, their destinies intertwined. Even the whispers of forgotten ambitions, carried on the wind down from Bukhansan, played a role in shaping the narrative of this nation. I thought of the ondol, the ingenious system that brought warmth to homes throughout the land, a testament to Anjong's skill, regardless of the whispers of his treachery. Even if he had plotted against Sejong, his contribution to Joseon society remained undeniable. The warmth that radiated from the ondol floors, the comfort it provided, was a tangible legacy, a constant reminder of the complex interplay between innovation and ambition, between creation and destruction. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, reflecting off the surface of the stream. The whispers were gone, but the questions remained. The mysteries of history, like the whispers in the wind, were elusive, often leaving more questions than answers. Yet, it was in the pursuit of these answers, in the piecing together of the fragments of the past, that we could gain a deeper understanding of the present. The cycle continued. The stream flowed on. And somewhere, on the slopes of Bukhansan, the wind carried whispers of secrets yet to be unveiled. Secrets that, like the echoes of Anjong's ambition, might one day reshape our understanding of the past, and perhaps even influence the course of the future. The stream, the mountain, the whispers, they were all connected, part of the same intricate web that bound together the past, the present, and the yet-to-be-written future of Joseon. And I, a stranger in time, was somehow caught within its threads, listening to the whispers in the wind, trying to decipher their meaning, trying to understand my place in this unfolding story. The dream is brighter than the full moon, brighter even than the memory of that bronze lamp, remember? Now, it's less a lamp and more a celestial glow, bathing everything in a soft, otherworldly light. It's a future, shimmering just out of reach, but close enough to taste. A Joseon where wisdom isn't hoarded by the elite, but shared like the rice at a harvest festival. Justice isn't a whispered prayer in the dark, but a bright banner waving proudly in the sun. It's what they always hoped for, you know. A Joseon where righteousness prevailed. Not just a dream, but an ideal etched into the very fabric of their society, a deep-rooted yearning passed down through generations. And in this dream, I see them. Dolls. Small, unassuming clay figures, yet each one holds a spark. Not a literal spark, mind you, although that would be quite the sight. This is a spark of wisdom, a flicker of understanding, a tiny ember of justice. And they're moving. Carried by a gentle wind, they dance and twirl, rising and falling like leaves in an autumn breeze. They drift over mountains and valleys, through bustling market squares and quiet village lanes. Reaching every corner of the land, these little messengers, these tiny beacons of hope. It reminds me of those old stories. You know, the ones about dolls being more than just toys? Some folks believed they held protective powers, wards against evil spirits. Well, in this dream, their power is something different, something more profound. They're vessels of wisdom, spreading knowledge and understanding wherever they touch down. A farmer, weathered and worn, catches one in his calloused hand. He looks at it, puzzled at first. Then a slow smile spreads across his face. He understands something he didn't before. A solution to a problem that's been plaguing his crops, perhaps. Or maybe a new way to irrigate his fields. Something whispered on the wind and caught by the little clay figure. A young scholar, hunched over his books, sees one land on his desk. He picks it up, turns it over in his hands. The spark within ignites something in him, a new perspective on an ancient text, a flash of insight that unlocks a hidden meaning. He'll write volumes, this scholar, filled with the wisdom he gleaned from a simple clay doll. A magistrate, faced with a difficult case, finds one nestled in the folds of his robe. He studies the unassuming figure, and suddenly, the truth becomes clear. A knot of confusion unravels, replaced by clarity and understanding. Justice will be served, guided by the wisdom carried on the wind. They're everywhere, these little dolls. In the hands of merchants haggling over prices. In the baskets of mothers rocking their children to sleep, tucked away in the pockets of traveling performers. Each doll, a tiny seed of wisdom, planted in the fertile ground of Joseon's soul. And as they spread, the dream brightens. The celestial glow intensifies. Joseon transforms, not through grand pronouncements or sweeping decrees, but through the quiet dissemination of wisdom, the gentle blossoming of understanding. It's a beautiful dream, isn't it? A testament to the power of small things, the potential for change hidden in the most unassuming of vessels. A reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can take flight on the wings of the wind, carried by something as simple as a clay doll. A reminder that justice, like wisdom, can find its way into every corner of the land, touching every heart, illuminating every mind. It's a dream of a better future, a future built not on power or privilege, but on the shared understanding and collective wisdom of its people. A future where the principles of justice and righteousness aren't just lofty ideals, but the very foundation upon which society is built. A future where even the smallest of voices can be heard, where the quietest whisper can ignite a revolution of thought. You're probably wondering if I'm ever going to finish this. I'm getting there, I promise. Just bear with me a little longer. Let the image of these little clay dolls, these tiny vessels of wisdom, sink in. Let the dream of a just and enlightened Joseon take root in your own imagination. Because it's a dream worth holding on to. A dream worth sharing. A dream, perhaps, worth fighting for. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, it's a dream that, one day, might just come true. One clay doll, one spark of wisdom, at a time. The wind carries them, and in their wake, the world is changed. The first light of dawn filters through the paper windows of my hermitage, painting the worn wooden floor in stripes of pale gold. A deep sense of peace settles within me, a quiet understanding that the stream of history flows onward, regardless of my small part in it. It's a familiar feeling, one that has visited me before in moments of profound contemplation. A comforting reminder that the world doesn't rest on my shoulders alone. My time here, nestled amongst these whispering pines, has run its course. The scent of burning pine needles drifts in from the small courtyard where my students tend the morning fire. They are young, eager, and full of the fire that once burned within me. To them, I have entrusted my writings, my interpretations of the Confucian classics, my humble attempts to unravel the mysteries of the universe. But Joseon scholar's legacy, his contribution to the intellectual tapestry of the nation, is everything. It's the mark he leaves upon the world, the ripple he creates in the pond of time. I have striven, as all scholars do, to leave a legacy that is both insightful and virtuous, a guide for future generations seeking wisdom and understanding. It is amusing to think that some scholars, after shuffling off this mortal coil, are granted even greater honors posthumously. Elevated in status, celebrated for their brilliance, their names etched deeper into the annals of history. While a pleasant thought, I highly doubt I'll be joining their ranks. I've ruffled too many feathers, challenged too many established doctrines, to be embraced so readily by the powers that be. No, my legacy, if any, will be a quieter one, whispered amongst scholars in hushed tones, debated in the candlelit corners of academies. Perhaps a footnote somewhere, a brief mention in a dusty tome. I can live with that. I adjust my robes, the simple hemp cloth a testament to my chosen life of austerity. My fingers trace the worn edges of my favorite brush, the one I use to pen my most cherished thoughts. It's a humble tool, yet it has been my constant companion throughout my years of study and contemplation. It feels strange to be leaving it behind, to be severing this tangible connection to my intellectual pursuits. But it is time. The world outside beckons, and even an old scholar like myself cannot resist the call of the unknown. My students enter, their faces alight with respect and a touch of apprehension. They know this is my final day here, the day their teacher leaves the sanctuary of the hermitage to re-enter the bustling world. They bow low, their voices echoing the formal greetings of respect ingrained in them through years of rigorous education. I return their bows, my heart heavy with the parting, yet also filled with pride in their progress. We share a simple breakfast of rice porridge and pickled vegetables, the silence broken only by the crackling of the fire and the chirping of birds in the nearby trees. It's a peaceful scene, a snapshot of a life dedicated to contemplation and the pursuit of knowledge. It strikes me as I watch them, how much of our Joseon scholarship revolves around men. The texts we study, the histories we record, the philosophies we debate, all are dominated by male voices. It makes me wonder about the untold stories, the silenced voices, the women whose intellectual contributions remain hidden in the shadows. Historians, even now, grapple with the question of women's influence on the philosophical landscape of Joseon. Did they play a significant role in shaping intellectual thought, their contributions obscured by the patriarchal structure of our society? Or were they relegated to the domestic sphere, their intellectual pursuits limited to the confines of their homes? The evidence is scant, fragmented, leaving much room for speculation and debate. It is a frustrating puzzle, one that may never be fully solved. Perhaps in some quiet corner of a noblewoman's hanok, philosophical discussions flourished, hidden from the official record. Perhaps behind closed doors, women debated the merits of Confucianism and Neo-Confucianism, their insights shaping the thoughts and actions of their sons and husbands. Perhaps, in the hushed whispers of female gatherings, new ideas were born, new interpretations of ancient texts were forged, passed down through generations of women, a secret lineage of intellectual pursuit. I rise from the table, my joints protesting the sudden movement. My students rush to assist me, their youthful energy a stark contrast to my aging frame. I smile, grateful for their support, both physical and intellectual. They are the future, the inheritors of the knowledge I have imparted to them. It is their responsibility now to carry the torch, to continue the exploration of truth and wisdom. I glance back at the hermitage, a simple structure nestled amongst the pines. It has been my sanctuary, my refuge, my place of solace and contemplation. It is a place I will always hold dear, a place where I found peace and understanding. But it is time to move on, to allow the stream of history to carry me to whatever awaits me next. With a final nod to my students, I turn and walk towards the path leading down the mountain. The morning sun warms my face, and a gentle breeze rustles the leaves of the trees. The world stretches out before me, full of possibilities, full of unknowns. And for the first time, in a long time, I feel a flicker of excitement, a sense of anticipation for what lies ahead. The cycle continues, the stream of history flows on, and I, a humble scholar, am carried along with it. The wind whispers through Bukhansan's trees, a lullaby of history. It sighs through the pine needles, a soft, mournful song that speaks of centuries past, of kingdoms risen and fallen, of secrets buried deep within the earth. It dances through the branches of the ginkgo trees, their golden leaves shimmering like forgotten coins from a bygone era. The wind carries the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a reminder of the cyclical nature of life, of endings and beginnings, of the inevitable passage of time. It's a calming whisper, a gentle hand on a fevered brow, a soothing balm for a weary soul. The stream flows onward, carrying the echoes of Joseon's past into the calm embrace of night. Its waters, once reflecting the fiery glow of torches and the glint of steel, now shimmer with the soft light of the moon and stars. The hurried footsteps of messengers and the clatter of hooves on cobblestones are replaced by the gentle gurgle of the water over smooth stones. The air, once thick with tension and the weight of unspoken words, is now clear and crisp, carrying only the faintest scent of pine and the distant call of an owl. Remember those numb fingers, stiff and aching from the biting winter winds, as you painstakingly crafted those tiny clay dolls, imbuing them with your hopes and fears, your dreams and desires? Each pinch of clay, each carefully painted detail, a silent prayer for a better future, a whispered plea for protection. The cold seeped into your bones, but the fire of your purpose burned bright within you, warming you from the inside out. Remember those hidden messages, tucked away in secret compartments, entrusted to the swift hands of loyal messengers? The weight of those secrets, heavy on your heart, the fear of discovery, a constant companion. Each coded word, each carefully chosen symbol, a lifeline in a world of shadows and whispers. The risk was immense, the stakes even higher. But the hope of freedom, of a future free from oppression, fueled your courage. Remember those battles of wit, fought in hushed tones behind closed doors, in the veiled language of courtly etiquette and subtle gestures? Every carefully chosen word, every meaningful glance, a weapon in the ongoing struggle for power and influence. The tension crackled in the air, thick and suffocating, but you held your ground, your mind sharp, your resolve unwavering. Remember those whispers of secrets beneath the mountain, shared in the darkness of hidden caves, under the watchful gaze of the silent sentinels of stone? The hushed voices, barely audible above the rustling leaves and the murmuring stream, carried tales of rebellion and resistance, of hope and defiance. The mountain itself seemed to hold its breath, listening to the whispers of its children, guarding their secrets with unwavering loyalty. They fade now, those memories, like embers cooling in the hearth. The sharp edges softened by the passage of time. The urgency, the fear, the constant vigilance, they begin to recede, replaced by a growing sense of peace, a quiet contentment that settles deep within your soul. The soft rustling of leaves, like whispers of forgotten stories, fills the air. The gentle murmur of the stream, a constant, soothing presence, washes over you, carrying away the last vestiges of anxiety and fear. The moon casts long, ethereal shadows, transforming the familiar landscape into a dreamscape of silver and black. A deep sense of peace settles over you like a warm blanket, enveloping you in its comforting embrace. The weight of the world lifts from your shoulders, the tension melts away from your muscles, and your mind finally stills. The past, with all its complexities and challenges, begins to fade into the background, replaced by the quiet serenity of the present moment. Sleep now and dream of a Joseon where clay dolls whisper wisdom and the mountains guard the secrets of the past. Dream of a world where courage and resilience triumph over adversity, where whispers of hope blossom into a chorus of freedom. Dream of a future where the echoes of the past serve as a guide, reminding us of the strength and resilience of the human spirit. Dream of a time when the wind whispers only lullabies, and the stream carries only peace. Let the mountains cradle you in their ancient embrace, and let the gentle rhythm of the night lull you into a deep and restful slumber.